The question has long been asked by research scientists why it is that the inert gases will not mix or unite with any of the other elements. The first answer is that the inert gases are not electrically divided and conditioned elements, as all of the others in the 9 octaves are. The inert gases begin in the first octave in invisible white fluorescent light of zero motion. They end at the 9th cathode in the 9th octave as visible white fluorescent light, which has reached a speed of nearly 186,400 miles per second. Fluorescent light is that light which begins in the undivided electric spectrum. It is the beginning and end of motion. All motion is either red or blue according to its sex. The end of motion at the amplitude of the 9th octave means that the divided spectrum has been united as one colorless, sexless light, which has been under such high compression that it has reached its limit of conditioning by motion and must be transformed from the white light of visible motion to the invisible white light of magnetic stillness. The fluorescent light is that ending of electric power to divide motion into pairs and to condition the pairs with the opposing sex tensions of electrically divided spectrum opposites. The inert gases are not pairs, they are not divided. Division takes place by light projected from them, but that projected light of spectrum pairs is the basis of the electrochemical elements, which have great volume and density in comparison. We have described the bullets of white light which are projected from radium. The speed and microscopic volume of the white rays of all of the transuranium elements acquire their maximum fluorescence and maximum speed of terrific compression as they withdraw into their inert gas niton, and from there on down the line to helium. On the return journey, however, this maximum fluorescence also acquires maximum penetration. It is this power of penetration into the 4th octave pressures of your body which expands its cells and brings death to you and all 4th octave organic bodies. It is also this power of penetration and speed at the 9th octave which not only unlocks the pressures of the lower inert gases octave by octave, but also unlocks the pressures of the 8th, 7th, 6th, and 5th octaves of radioactive elements. Most deadly among these are radium, thorium, actinium, strontium, barium, calcium, potassium, arsenic, and phosphorus. These are the elements which radioactivity has released in vast quantities in the upper stratosphere and would soon crowd the lower atmospheric layers with such a change of environment that oxygen-dependent bodies could no longer live. It may seem incredible to you who are accustomed to the ideal of density in matter and of the difficulty of ordinary light to penetrate even its crust, to know that the white fluorescent rays of plutonium or neptunium can penetrate several feet into solid lead after having become de-electrolyzed by their impact with niton. It is the accepted belief of the entire scientific world that radium eventually becomes harmless by decaying into lead. This is an impossibility of nature, for radium is male and lead is female in their sex divisions. Such a transition is one effect which is entirely outside of nature. As a final word, white light is the end as well as the beginning of the divided spectrum. Divided light reaches its limit of power to become compressed, and from that point its power of expansion or explosion, into its zero is indescribable by words. If such rays as these reach your body, they can penetrate to any part of it without resistance. They can also act as triggers to unloose all other lower octaves which are stored in them. You thus have uranium in your blood cells and tissues, strontium and calcium in your bone marrow, and other radioactively liberated particles affecting every part of your body, its genes, hormones, and even unto the destruction of the protons of your hair and nails, as confined within one particle. Fortunately, the human body can stand quite a dosage of such rays before showing it by bone cancer, leukemia, and other effects of radioactivity. But also, unfortunately, these rays are accumulative. They never leave the body. The defects mentioned above, including sterility, are incurable advance notices of the fact that you have reached your limit of power to take more of these translucent rays into your body. You can take no more, yet what you are going to do about it, if you are irrevocably sealed within, you can take no more. Yet what are you going to do about it if you are irrevocably sealed within an increasingly radioactive environment? What is any living animal or vegetable going to do about it? That is the question which we are submitting to the world. What is your answer to it? In conclusion, we must add a few more paragraphs regarding the construction of the inert gases, which needs volumes instead of paragraphs. This we must say, however. If you refer to Figure 5, which symbolizes the universe as a 9-octave harp, you will note by the drawing that the strings are of the same length. It would be impossible to symbolize their relative lengths in trying to express their undying principle. Likewise, it would be impossible to symbolize their ring proportions. All we can say in this brief treatise to clarify that mystery is that the 4 rings of the first octave are very large and grow smaller as the octaves proceed to the 9th. Likewise, the length of the first octave string is so very long that its vibrations are immeasurable and undetectable. The only thing we can think of to compare with this first string is the lowest string of a harp. It is so low that its vibrations have no resonance in them, but they are detectable. Now add 1 or 2 much longer and thicker strings below this lowest one, and they would be silent, for it would be impossible for them to create one common wave crest amplitude where a collision could occur. The reverse condition takes place in the very short strings of the 8th and 9th octaves. These are so tightly tensed by maximum compression that they too cannot reach one common amplitude. Even in the 6th and 7th octaves that attempt to collide and form a loop of force is split into 5 pairs of attempts in each of these 2 octaves following the silicon octave. In the 8th there are 13 pairs, but in the 9th the number is unknown, and at least 21 on the red side. The blue side fails to provide balanced mates for the 6 of the transuranium series, so all motion disappears into 0 at that 9th octave position. You may be helped in imagining this condition by turning up the tuning key of the highest string on your harp to a point where it will no longer produce a normally advanced wave crest tone. If the wire did not snap, you would eventually reach a position where you could not hear any tone which would be audible to your senses. We trust this brief explanation will at least direct your thinking and imagining to the incredible high frequencies of such an element as plutonium, and the unbelievable high fission temperatures for infinitely short periods, which make it possible for the radioactive elements to prepare humus and alluvial soil for organic life by their terrific explosive power on micro scale. We trust also that this description will fully explain to you why such extraordinary power for expansion should not be released within the cells of bodies which are struggling hard to keep their body's cells compressed sufficiently to live. If you could imagine just one cell of your body straining against the power of an elephant, you will admit that such a discrepancy of balance power would be hopeless, and it is. Conclusion. We now conclude our story, which has primarily dealt with the so-called life and death of bodies, for they are what we are interested in preserving from destruction in order that they may fulfill their purposes of completing the divine symphony of creation as actors in it. To do so comprehensively, however, we have had to tell enough of man's divinity as an eternal being to enable one to gain a better understanding of his universe and the creator of it. We therefore repeat words written in earlier pages of this book, which say that our bodies express life only to the fast, general active, centrifugal motion which charges and polarizes, and that they die only by the fast, radioactive, centrifugal motion which discharges and depolarizes. We made this statement to demonstrate that radioactivity multiplies its death speed in each higher octave. In so doing, we demonstrated that a radioactively charged atmospheric environment would sooner or later eliminate all organic matter from the surface of the planet and reduce it to a desert of rock and sand, boiling in a temperature of at least 180 degrees. This was our primary purpose. Its secondary purpose was to hasten the day of spiritually unfolding man by giving him new knowledge of his close relationship to his Creator and to creation. This new knowledge of the mind universe in its relation to the body universe would also help clarify the nature of radioactivity in its action upon organic bodies, and especially oxygen. As oxygen cannot coexist with the free metals above the carbon octave upon the red side of the spectrum, radioactivity must not be allowed to change our atmospheric normality. This information has been given for you to act upon in accord with your decision and belief. If you believe that what is herein written is not true to the facts of nature, the only other alternative is to prove that they are wrong by continuing to practice and pay the dreadful price of such a gamble, which these words were written to save you from. It would be a very pitiful thing to happen, however, for the human race is now due for a tremendous mental transition into another step of higher intellectual unfolding. If another annihilating Third World War can be avoided, our future generations of gradually unfolding mind awareness will bring to man the knowledge of his own divinity. As long as man continues to think of his body as being his individuality, he will think individually rather than universally. When he at long last discovers his eternal self to be the projector of his own body, and is making himself in his own image, he will then know his universality, his oneness with all creation. He can never thereafter think of himself as an individual, and will so act in all of his transactions in relation to his oneness with all other men. This ideal, higher condition will come about more quickly as the old world's knowledge of the geometry of space and the oneness of all creating things shall unfold to make the zero invisible universe as intellectually real as the universe of motion is now sensually real. This day will come, whether civilization again falls or not. A few centuries of dark ages could not stop it, for physical man would still be here. Radioactivity alone could stop it, for it would take at least 50,000 years for the recovery of the Earth's normalcy and millions of years after that, for the slow unfolding of the pattern of the man idea through the many bodybuilding stages, which nature has to make use of in her long-time process of unfolding man of today from the amoeba of millions of years ago. Civilizations of individuals may come and go, as many have come and gone, and as this one is now so rapidly declining. But always the cause of decline is individual thinking and of individual concern. Individuals believe they can acquire by taking. Universalists know they can acquire only by giving. When all men shall have learned the lesson of love sufficiently to become one in their thinking, they will become one in their giving to the whole instead of to the self. When that day of unity shall come, we shall then have a civilization which will endure, but not until then. Omega. The supreme miracle that can happen to any man is the discovery of his own divinity in his oneness with God. If this book shall have led him to the light of mind which man is in God, and he is illumined with that light of all knowing, all power, and all presence, giving him dominion over all the earth, it will have then served the double purpose of the hopes of its authors, rather than just the single purpose of its naming. Addendum. Nonconformity of Yi-Yang theory. As this book goes to press, an experiment at Columbia University conducted upon theories promulgated by two young Chinese physicists, Professor T.D. Lee and Professor C.N. Yang, affords an excellent example of how easily the senses can be deceived into arriving at wrong conclusions. We are therefore adding an addendum to explain why neither the premises nor conclusions are in accord with nature. The essence of what made this discovery so revolutionary that it upset many fundamentally believed in facts of physics lies in the conclusion that all atoms spin in the direction of their motion, meaning the direction of their axis, which means that atoms or particles ejected from the north end of a decaying atom, such as cobalt, spin in a right-handed clockwise direction, and those which are emitted from the south end spin in a left-handed anti-clockwise direction. This discovery led to the possibility that atoms acted like right and left threaded screws, and that might eventually explain how matter is held together by some mysterious force within matter and solve the mystery of creation. This cannot be briefly explained because every single premise upon which the experiment was founded is wrongly assumed to be what it is believed to be. These wrong conceptions must first be clarified. We will then explain why cobalt has given an entirely different result than carbon would give, and that sodium would have given another effect of unbalanced ejections, while sodium chloride would give a balanced effect, and tantalum would also give another effect from the one produced by cobalt. In other words, when it is shown why cobalt emitted a large electron from one end and a small one from the other, and it can be clearly explained why every single unit atom and every paired one will give different and predictable results, it will then be easy to comprehend why the conclusions arrived at by this experiment are invalid. To begin with, the experiment itself should not have been necessary. With a true knowledge of the nature of electricity, the right results would have been predictable. To substantiate this statement, we will predict other results from the same experiment with full knowledge that they will be as stated. Step-by-step explanation. We quote from Life. A crystal containing cobalt nuclei was placed in a magnetic field created by current flowing through a wire coil. it was already known that the cobalt nuclei would line up in the magnetic field. Figure 69 indicates the wire coil, the direction of the electric current, and the position within it that the cobalt crystal is placed. The first wrongly assumed premise is that the wire coil creates a magnetic field. It creates an electric field, not a magnetic one. There are no magnetic fields in nature. There are electric fields of curved motion, which are bounded by magnetic planes of non-motion and zero curvature. It must be borne in mind always that any expression of motion anywhere is omnipresently repeated everywhere. The human consciousness has not quite acquired that sense of omnipresent repetition as yet, but familiarity with it through TV and radar is developing it. The cobalt experiment is, therefore, not a local happening which is taking place in Columbia universe and nowhere else. The electric field provides for it to happen there, but the magnetic geometry of the zero universe provides for it happening universally by nature's radar system of extensions from 0 points of stillness, which become mirror planes of stillness invisibly formed in space to repeat the divisions and multiplications of motion in any part of the universe to every other part of it. The wire coil of the Columbia experiment has given no thought to the basic fact that electricity divides for the purpose of multiplying. Otherwise the coil it made for its electric field would be like figure 70. We cite this fact for any experimental work done in a laboratory is valid only if it conforms with the electric current of nature, which alone creates the universe. Any experiment whatsoever which does not fit within the principles of the electric current is invalid, for nothing outside of nature can be valid. Step number 2. The cylindrical coil made for the creation of an electric field does not in any respect conform with the electric current which divides the stillness of cathoids into moving pairs for the purpose of multiplying the motion of those moving pairs to create the heat and compression necessary to simulate the ideal, which concentrated electric mind thinking desires to give objective expression to. The Einstein equation properly defined this principle by the words which say that fast motion multiplies electric potential, but that principle has not been applied to the mechanics of coil making. For that reason, the loops of force which cylindrical coils create are not focused as they would be if they followed the crystalline shape of the balanced electric current as shown in figure 70. If you will study the corner reflectors of radar, as shown in figure 6263, and their relation to ring projections from inert gases, and observe their spiral formation, as shown in figure 64, you will better comprehend the wave, which controls the construction of all matter. The two essentials omitted for the perfect carrying out of this experiment up to this point are 1. Failure to conform to the working principles of the electric current. 2. Failure to conform to the omnipresence of nature by making electrical fields to conform with the mathematics of dividing and multiplying pressures. Step number 3, we again quote from Life. The test was based on the previously proven fact that the nucleus of the atom decays. In the process, it emits one electron and one electrino, an uncharged particle even smaller than an electron. It was not necessary to prove that cobalt decays. To decay means to disintegrate, depolarize, discharge, and die. All matter does that, whether atom or man. This experiment, however, did not assist in the decay process, for it lined up the gravity shaft of cobalt with the gravity shaft of the electric field. That is a process of polarization, which divides any one electrical condition into pairs. The process of decay is an opposite effect. It ejects rings from equators, as clearly shown in Saturn. Also, the statement that uncharged particles are ejected from one end is not true to nature. There are no uncharged particles in nature. Whenever there is matter, there is motion. Motion is an electric effect, which charges all matter. Step number 4, according to parity, as they spun, half of them should have emitted their electrons from the north end of the magnetic field and the other half toward the south. Actually, far more electrons came out of the south end of the nuclei. By repeating the test under varying conditions, it was verified that cobalt nuclei emit electrons from one particular end. This shows that one end of the nucleus is different from the other, something never known before. Let us analyze these statements to see if there is right reasoning in them in accordance with the electric current. In the life diagram, large particles labeled electrons are being ejected from the south pole of the cobalt atom, and small ones called electrinos are being ejected from the north end. In Figure 69 is an interpretation of the life diagram accepting that we are using only one particle. The life diagram shows 3 cobalt particles, oval-shaped, and their respective small and large ejected particles. The names of these particles is of no import here, but the fact that one end of cobalt atoms ejects big particles and the other ejects small particles is important. Also, the statement that it was never known before that one end of an atom is different from the other end is also important, for it is not true. It has been known, as long as electricity has been known, that each end of a polarized body is different, and all matter is polarized. From each end of a balanced atom, which means equally paired, will emit the same size particles from each end because polarized or divided pairs are male and female and belong to the red and blue sides of the spectrum. The important fact that has been overlooked is the fact that an unbalanced particle of matter cannot emit equal potentials from both ends. To demonstrate this fact, I will start in the next one. I'm getting kind of tired of reading. I thought I was about done with this book, but there's a little more. Just gonna go down and see how much more. There's another diagram, another diagram. Wow, there's a lot more. Quite a lot more. This book is easily found at abundanthope.net. Okay, I think that was the end there. Okay, I will begin again in the next one, whenever that will be. This is the Dove Lady, over and out for now.